it possible that Donald Trump behind the scenes is frustrated by the Gaza war? There is a new article by Axios that suggests that behind the scenes, Donald Trump is not happy with the death and destruction of many of the children in Gaza. Now, if this sounds familiar to you, it's probably because you heard something similar under Biden's administration, and we'll get into all of that. Let's get into this article here, folks. This is by Barack Ravid. It says that Trump is frustrated by Gaza war, wants Netanyahu to wrap it up. This is according to U.S. officials, and you can see the picture of both of them here. Let's go ahead and get into it, folks. President Trump has been frustrated by the ongoing war in Gaza and upset by images of suffering of Palestinian children, and has told his aides to tell Netanyahu he wants him to wrap it up. Two White House officials tell Axios. So let's go ahead and dive in a little bit here, folks. I remember this same publication writing a similar article about Joe Biden during his presidency, that he was also frustrated and was really wanting a ceasefire. I didn't believe it at that time, and many of you did not either. And then later on, we started to find out that it was revealed that the Biden administration actually never pushed for a ceasefire, never told Israel to stop. So if you're wondering if this is how Donald Trump actually feels, I think you need to look at the actions and not the words. Again, why was this being said privately but not publicly? The actions show that they're still giving weapons to Israel. So just keep that in mind. Don't forget that there was no food or aid allowed into Gaza for over 80 days. So I just want people to pump the brakes for a second, because I just remember the same publication having a similar story about President Biden. It goes on to say why it matters. U.S. and Israeli officials deny that Trump is prepared to abandon Israel or that he is applying intense pressure on Netanyahu. But they admit there are growing policy differences between a president who wants to end the war and a prime minister who is massively expanding it. The president is frustrated about what is happening in Gaza. He wants the war to end. He wants the hostages to come home. He wants aid to go in, and he wants to start rebuilding Gaza. And I think we all know what they mean by rebuilding, right? So think about this for just a second. I do believe that Donald Trump does want this to go ahead and end. So by wrap it up, I think what that means is that Donald Trump wants Benjamin Netanyahu to go ahead and find a quick end to this war. Now, that could mean different things. That could mean that he wants him to go in and flatten Gaza, whatever is left of it at this point. Or it could also mean that he wants him to begin these negotiations with Hamas, get the rest of the hostages out, and put an end to this so that he, which he has stated publicly, can start rebuilding Gaza. There were also reports that Donald Trump wants the Palestinian people to be sent to Libya, which means that rebuilding would not include them, right? And we've seen this happen before, where leaders say that they want to rebuild, but that doesn't include the residents who are already there. Usually that means newer people that would be coming in. Israel right now is at a brink. I think that obviously we're showing that the polls show that the majority of Americans do not support Israel anymore. That in itself is astonishing, considering that has never been the case as long as I can remember. So there's that. Israel's reputation has been ruined on the world stage the moment that South Africa brought them to the ICJ. There's more to get into there. And then also the reality is Israel has been very vocal about wanting to go after other countries or going after other countries. They've been attacking Syria. They've gone full in to Syria. They've been attacking Lebanon. They want to have a war with Iran. They're attacking the Houthis, right? Ansar Allah. And now they have actually deemed Qatar as an enemy as well. Because Donald Trump had the meeting with Qatar and they gave him that jet, etc. Now Benjamin Netanyahu is saying that they see them as a possible enemy as well. So it's very clear to a lot of people that Israel wants to expand. This will be important when I get into the news story later on tonight, if you're seeing this today, and Thursday evening, if you see it at a different time. When we get into the story that was just released about the 2 Israeli embassy staffers that were killed in D.C. Late Wednesday evening. This is all going to connect in some way, shape, or form. And I really do believe that there is an ongoing effort to try to get Americans to have more support for Israel, and it has not been working. I think that's another proponent to this, that like Donald Trump could want this to wrap up very quickly, because he also sees that Americans are no longer supporting Israel the way that they did before. It goes on to say, in the days since Trump's trip to the region, the U.S. has been pressing both Israel and Hamas to accept a new proposal presented by White House envoy Steve Witkoff for a hostage and a ceasefire deal. Witkoff has been speaking directly with Netanyahu and his top advisor, Ron Dermer, and to the Hamas leadership through a back channel facilitated by Palestinian-American businessman Bashara Baba. The negotiations have shown little progress. Meanwhile, the IDF are proceeding with an operation to displace all 2 million Palestinians in Gaza to live in a humanitarian zone and flatten most of the enclave. Now, I want to go ahead and make a correction there. There are not 2 million. It is less than that at this point. Donald Trump even said so himself. He said there was estimated 1.9 million, right? So a lot of Palestinian people have been killed. The numbers have been underreported, which many of you have predicted as well. But the reality is here, folks, Hamas agreed to a negotiation with President Donald Trump to release Eden Alexander. That happened. After that fact, Hamas made a statement that there was supposed to be an agreement on Steve Witkoff's end for Israel to end the blockade on Gaza. That part of the deal did not happen. So these negotiations have been working out more so for Israel, not for the people of Gaza. Moving on here, the logjam in the talks and the situation on the ground convinced Vice President Vance to scrap plans for a visit to Israel this week. His decision sheds light on how the U.S. feels about the current Israeli policy in Gaza. You see what I mean? So yeah, they're talking about, this is how they know how Americans are starting to feel. An Israeli official told Axios that at the moment, Netanyahu doesn't feel strong pressure from Trump. If the president wants a hostage and a ceasefire deal in Gaza, he needs to put much more pressure on both sides. So according to Netanyahu, Trump is not pressuring him at all. Other leaders are attempting to apply pressure. The leaders of the UK, France, and Canada issued a statement on Monday threatening to take steps against Israel over the war in Gaza. So you're starting to see a split here within the West. This is very important, guys. You're starting to see a split among the Western countries, UK, France, and Canada, moving in a different direction than the United States. And I'm wondering, going forward, is it going to be this particular issue that starts to pull these other countries that are allies with the United States away from the United States? And I know President Macron has spoken about this before, that he doesn't feel as though that Europe should always have to answer to the United States, that Europe should be its own, power, like a third power. So things are shifting in a different direction. We will not stand by while the Netanyahu government pursues these egregious actions. If Israel does not cease the renewed military offensive and lift its restrictions on humanitarian aid, we will further concrete actions in response. Everybody see what's happening? Netanyahu rejected their call and accused the leaders in London, Ottawa, and Paris of offering a huge prize for the genocidal attack on Israel on October 7th, while inviting more such atrocities. Isn't it interesting how they can continue to call that a genocide, but not what's happening to the Palestinian people when it's obviously more Palestinians have been killed? The British government announced on Monday that it is suspending free trade deal negotiations with Israel. imposing new sanctions on Israeli settlers involved in attacks on the Palestinians in the West Bank, and summoned the Israeli ambassador to the Foreign Office of London. So now we're starting to see the possibility of sanctions being applied to Israel by other Western countries. So again, this entire genocidal colonizer conquest of Israel is starting to divide Western allies from the United States. All of this to protect Israel. Is it worth the U.S. government losing its allies to protect Netanyahu and the Israeli government? Things are shifting. State of play. One area where Trump has put pressure on Netanyahu over the last 2 weeks is Israel's total freeze on humanitarian aid deliveries to Gaza. A White House official told Axios that the president was upset by pictures of suffering children and babies in Gaza and pressed the Israelis to reopen the gates. On Sunday, the Israeli cabinet approved the resumption of aid deliveries to Gaza, and on Monday, a dozen trucks with baby food and other supplies entered the enclave. The White House official said more needs to be done. Now, this is a question, too, also for Trump's base, because I have noticed there does seem to be quite a split on this particular issue with those that are, Trump supporters, those who voted for Donald Trump, where some of them have been very vocal about they're not happy what's happening to the Palestinian, the children, the babies. They are heavily against it. Obviously, you guys all know Candace Owens has been very vocal about this. But aside from the podcast space, even people on the ground, right? People have been a little bit more public about, no, I didn't vote for this. You were supposed to end this. I don't support this. And then there's another side of Trump supporters that do support it because of said biblical reasons. And I've said this before. The Bible does not say this, that they're supposed to have all the land and all this kind of stuff. It's so twisted and sick. It's absolutely ridiculous. The Bible does not say that European settlers are supposed to have all of that land. So people again have to remember they are settlers. There are settlers that are there. While Trump felt his Middle East trip was a success, he believes the war in Gaza is holding back his plans for the region, a senior White House official said. The president sees a real chance for peace and prosperity in the region, but the war in Gaza is the last hot spot and he wants to end it. Now, that's coming from a White House official. The second White House official described the war as a distraction from other things Trump wants to do. There is a lot of frustration by this crisis getting dragged on. The official said Trump's decision to move unilaterally to secure the release of the American-Israeli hostage Eden Alexander, rather than waiting for Israel to agree on a broader deal, was a result of frustration. What they are saying, the president may be saying, hey, listen, let's try to end the war. He might speak strongly, but his support is ironclad. Trump hostage response envoy Adam Boehler told Fox News on Monday. He stressed that a Washington Post report claiming the administration threatened to abandon Israel was fake. And see, this is the part here that we wanted everybody to really pay attention to. So once again, there were publications that said that Donald Trump was walking away from Netanyahu, was abandoning Israel. That is not the case. That has not been the case. There may be some tension between the two because, as you see, again, Donald Trump is asking him to go ahead and wrap this up. But Donald Trump is not going to abandon Israel. And I think this is something that people have to reckon with. He has been very clear about his support for Israel. He has been very clear about his belief for Israel to exist. So I don't know why people thought that Donald Trump would abandon Israel. He's not going to abandon Israel, just like Joe Biden wasn't going to abandon Israel, just like Kamala Harris wasn't going to abandon Israel. So those articles that were put out into the ethers, I feel as though that was some kind of way, I guess, to give that other portion of Trump's base some type of hope that, like, oh, look, he is actually trying here, et cetera. But the reality is Donald Trump is not going to abandon Israel. People need to just get that out of their heads. And I would also say, I'm gravely concerned about the fate of the Palestinian people in Gaza and in the West Bank. I really do feel like Israel is going to remove all of them. Like it's baffling to me that here it is 2025 and there are people sitting back who are just nodding their head and they're okay with this happening. And those same people are here to tell you, you gotta, help the white South Africans because there's a genocide happening there, which there isn't. I'll explain that more when we get into the story later Thursday evening about the visit with Cyril Ramaphosa and Donald Trump at the White House and what the data actually shows. But when it comes to the Palestinian people, we're talking hundreds of thousands of people that have been killed either by bombs or by starvation. No sympathy, no nothing. And a lot of it has to go back to the lobby interest groups, which is what I said before. This is why we need free public elections in the United States. We need a removal of corporate money. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters Monday that Trump had made it very clear to Hamas that he wanted to see all hostages released and made it very clear he wants to see this conflict in the region end. So here's the thing, folks. As I've said before, this is now no longer Joe Biden's issue. This is now Donald Trump's genocide. It's not Joe Biden's anymore. Trump is president. And honestly, the way that he chooses to handle this particular conflict could determine what that means for the Republican Party come 2028. It could determine, I don't think Trump's going to run a third term, but people are saying that he wants to, or whatever, but you could possibly see a split happen within the Republican Party, depending on the way that Donald Trump chooses to handle this particular issue. But I would not get excited into believing that Donald Trump is really on his way to abandon Israel. He's not. Same publication tried to give people this type of hope when Biden was president, and it turned out to be false. But this is what they're talking about now, that behind the scenes, there is frustration. Is that going to lead to him abandoning Israel? Absolutely not. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.